right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here at SaaS Innovate. We're thrilled to have you. My name is Joy DeBolt. I work in our marketing department. I have the pleasure today of introducing our wonderful panel for your session. We have Peter Williams from our partner AWS, who will be serving as our moderator and host. We also have Jan Zawitsky, who is here from Moneta Bank. We're excited to hear about their experience working with our other partner, Trask, with Jakob Heitek here as well. So I will hand it over to Peter Williams. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Joy. Jan and Jakob, maybe you could just each take a couple of minutes and give a quick background on yourselves. Just for context, I'm Peter Williams. I lead our AWS Global Financial Services Partner Technical Team. We work with large banks and insurance companies to help them in their journey to AWS, specifically with partners. So I'm really excited to be with both of you today. Jan, maybe you could just take a couple of minutes and
All right, Peter,
share
I'll jump into it. So I don't want to prolong that, but I'm Jan Zdobinski. I'm from Moneta Money Bank. We are stationed in Prague, Czech Republic. That's a relatively small market. I'm responsible for CRM and retail product and branch development.
Right.
Jakub?
And I'm Jakub Bitka. I'm with Trask. We're an IT and professional services company, also based in Prague. We like to consider ourselves partner to Moneta Money Bank.
Right.
My role within the company is I'm the director of the consulting vertical for FSI, and we've been working together for quite some time.
That's right.
Thank you both, thank you both. So, Jan, let's just maybe level set with yourself and Moneta Bank. My understanding of how you have been working with Jakob and SaaS and AWS is in really building out your marketing campaigns and helping your bank reach customers much more seamlessly, really with CI360 on AWS, and working with Jakob to help implement and make this real in your organization. Give us a little bit of your context, where you started, what the problem statement was, and then how you took it.
Yeah, right. So to set the level, we are, as I mentioned, we are a relatively small market. It's a 10 million country. So and there are over 20 banks really present in the retail segment on the market. So the competition is quite tough, significant, and the retail banking, from my point of view, where I stand, at least on the market, is quite commoditized, right? So what you want to do is, besides competing with price, you probably want to compete with relevance, and all sorts of relevance you can imagine. One should be push for digital, which we've done in the past, let's say 6 years, heavily, I should mention. We've built up the mobile platform, which is probably the most awarded platform in the market. So we are quite proud of that, and yes, and relevance, and that's probably a buzzword everyone's speaking about right now. That's the personalization. But I got a slightly different point of view on the personalization topic, and we'll probably discuss that in the future in the detail.
Great, fantastic. And in your journey, Jan, part of what I think you have been looking to do is not just personalize, but do things like taking in temporal events and streaming real-time events to be able to target your customer in new ways. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So we've been with SaaS for quite some time now. We are SaaS customer over 15 years, and we've used, up until now, we've used the old stack, DMA and RTDM, and we've really come to a point where we thought we reached the limit of the potential of those tools. So that's why we've chosen up to adopt and migrate to CI360 tools. So that's and what we want to push for is with that is to yes, personalize, but I should say push for much more A/B testing, much more hypothesis testing, much more experimentation, because we kind of reach the limit of what we can do without those things.
Okay, and Jakob, tell us about your experience with Trask, working with Moneta in this journey. I know one of the stages was really moving to AWS, and then subsequently it's been about upgrading and moving to SaaS CI360.
Yep. I mean, there's because we have our relationship with Moneta is much wider than the topic that we're discussing here, and we do things around integration, app modernization, things like that. So the good thing is when we got together, right, and we started discussing like the need, because you are very hard sales focused, right? So the goal is always like you are expected to sell more, right? And when we start discussing that, it's about relevance. So it's one thing that we quickly got to the point that you need some modernization to happen, but there's also other things that we wanted to do. And what I personally liked, and that was the journey, is that you tend to move the right way for me, because the experiments was also in terms of proving value of certain things. And you talk about relevance, yeah, but you talk about the fact that you get only a limited number of personnel and FTEs that you can use, right? So you want to become very flexible. And this is really where we can have very good discussions. We've been having very good discussions and deployed a number of quite cool things. A good example that comes to mind is when we discussed, let's try to leverage data streaming into the decisioning, where we basically used on AWS, we used Apache Kafka to stream data points based on transactions, payment transactions, into the system to try to derive the value. And I'm sure you can add to that.
I mean that for me it's like connecting the dots. It's not just about the CI360. I mean that's a big piece, the whole SaaS infrastructure, but. And here we come to my understanding of personalization or hyper personalization. So what I think you need is you need the right triggers, right events to collect. You need the data for that, and you need it in real time. That's where the streaming piece come in mind and come to place. So that's one piece. Then you need the SaaS infrastructure, sure, to make the correct decisions and set up the correct user journeys. And then with the CI360, you got the experimentation ability to find out what works and what not. Because what we are looking for is we actually don't want to do something which doesn't work, right? So it's not just about creating new campaigns and new user journeys, new stuff. It's also about decommissioning the old stuff which doesn't work, because that frees the capacity of the team, which is limited, as you mentioned correctly, to be able to do something else, which makes us more money at the end of the day.
Part of the journey, which was interesting, is because when we went to try this proof of value, was obviously, I mean, the original discussion was you're gonna expect to have higher conversions, you're gonna have higher sales. But the end result was kind of surprising to me, because I remember when we started discussing, so what is it bringing, right? I mean, where is the value? And we realized that basically what you told me was that it really gives you the effectiveness, because with the kind of streaming, with the context detection, using the event processing tools like SaaS ESP, you are basically able to turn around a campaign even 3 times as fast. So basically, I mean, that's why I thought, oh, hang on, it doesn't have to be just direct sales that you're getting through this, but it can be the freed up capacity, because you can effectively do 3 times as many things. Yeah?
I mean, I'll be maybe slightly more technical now, but up until now, we've done all of the, let's say, event integrations, like custom, like ad hoc, one by one for each campaign. This needs significant investment into your IT and BI capabilities. So that's heavy stuff, right? That costs money. So with the streaming piece and the CI piece together, what we are seeing and what we are looking for is actually to save the time of the campaigning people and of the IT people, and we can reinvest this time to create more personalized journeys and try out more different journeys and find the correct one which has the highest conversion.
Yeah, and it's interesting for those that may not have been as close to the real-time space for marketing and how some of these events can be used. I know earlier you were both able to explain to me kind of an example of kind of the before and after picture. I don't know if one of you wants to take a stab at that.
So I'll try to start with that. Maybe Jakub can explain the detail afterwards. So when I was saying connecting dots and what we did with the streaming, so here's an example. I mean, so we've taken all of the customer transactions, online payments, all of that all together. It's like millions of transactions in a single day. That's a lot of data, and if you want to push for having it real time, I mean, there's not probably a better piece of technology than streaming. So we've built up the stream in Apache Kafka. We connected AWS Databricks with our machine learning models to categorize the transactions on the fly, push it back into the stream, and then bring it all to Flink event stream processing into SAS, and basically being able to push a mobile notification in 7 seconds, offering travel insurance.
Yeah, the real case is that the customer makes a transaction, and like we discussed, you want to know when the customer is traveling. Well, we worked out that there's a case that you can even work out that the customer will be traveling. So quickly, transactions that we are categorizing in terms of, is this a purchase of an airplane ticket or holiday ticket? And that's what we do. Moneta knows it right away, and in 7 seconds they can execute and initiate the push notification to the customer. Here's your travel insurance, click on the button, it's yours.
And by the way, back to the IT part, I mean, all of that is pretty simple to set up. Once you have it set it up, the infrastructure is set up. All of that is being done with pretty much business people, or maybe some SQL analyst, rather than heavy Java development.
Okay,
so that's the saving, right?
Right. Yeah. So tremendous automation and scalability. And just for a second, to think about that example where you've got a customer, they just bought an airline ticket. 7 seconds later, they're getting an offer for travel insurance. A week later, maybe they're in Orlando, Florida, and you're noticing that again from your real-time data set, and being able to then offer them something that's relevant in Florida. Because when they buy the ticket, they may not know, you may not know where the customer is going, but once they arrive in Orlando, you got a pretty good sense now the types of things that the offers they may be interested in, a variety of things that you might need while you're traveling. This information that's flowing and free-flowing and being able to incorporate into your marketing capability is a tremendous step forward.
Yeah, so that's where the customer journeys come in place, right? You can now, you've offered the travel insurance. Now okay, he is in Orlando. The client is in Orlando. He starts spending. Now you can suddenly offer a credit card, maybe some withdrawal for free or something. I mean, you can nicely bundle your services based on the transactions, and that's what I meant when I was speaking about the real-time triggers. All of that, the transactions, the behavior in digital channels, all of that, it could be a relevant trigger for service, or in our case mostly. And yes, as Jakub mentioned, we are hard selling bank mostly. So all of that could be a right trigger for a cross-sell.
That's where I see the real value is that if you use the technology right to give you the flexibility and give you the time, it enables you to really utilize the resources that you have to start thinking about the next thing that they would like to do, because they have the time and they can do it. The transactions are in already, they know how to work with them, right? So setting up a campaign is easier. I have time to think. I can work out what's the next best move for me to take the next step on the customer journeys that I'm designing.
I can even specify that. So before we set up this kind of infrastructure, to set up such a campaign, it would probably take, I don't know, 2 to 4 weeks based on the capacity on the IT side, release cycle and whatnot. Now we can do that in a couple of hours because we've got all of the transactions. the SQL analytic is on the team, so he can select the transactions we want to use for the campaign, and then we just set it up in SaaS, and here we go, a few hours, done.
That's amazing. And it's incredible to think about the difference. 4 weeks to invest in something that may or may not be what you want, by the way.
Exactly, it may not work, right?
Versus 2 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe let's just take a step back and think about where you started. When you first started down this journey, even before you were on AWS, what was the picture look like? And maybe take us a little bit into that journey, first to AWS, what the benefits were, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously with the movement to cloud, you got a scalability of the solution. So part of the streaming, as I mentioned, that's millions of transactions. That's pretty hard to integrate in real time if you don't have the cloud capability for that. But there are some consequences of that as well. And what I'm always mentioning before, you simply had the server in-house, and you wouldn't mind how the integration works, as long as the server can handle it. You can call it, you can do whatever, you can integrate whatever, right? Now, when you're paying for the cloud, you have to decide what's the right infrastructure, what's the right architecture, and what's the right integration, because you're simply paying money for each of the calls. So that's a complexity which comes at the cost of the scalability.
It's about the performance as well. I mean, it's just about the breadth of transactions, but you're using tons of AI and machine learning models below that, right? So I mean, including that, trying to sort of ask the right questions about the customer to not just sort of get the explicit triggers that you might have, but link it to other models that you have. I think that's really where the value of the hosted in cloud services really happens.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, so we've built a data lake on AWS and in Databricks. So all our models currently run there in Python, and it's like 30 to 40 models. Most of them are sales relevant. So that's perception to buy models, churn models, and all of that is in real time interconnected to the campaigns we do. So we can either in batch or real time segment the clients based on the results of the models. I mean, that's how we sell.
One of the interesting things you mentioned to me earlier was that previous to moving to the cloud, you actually had a batch platform and a real-time platform.
Right.
And some of the challenges with that.
Yeah, so this was the challenge which was kind of natural with the old SaaS infrastructure, because as I mentioned, we had the MA and RTDM, and kind of double the BI development, because there were two separate databases, one for the batch world and one for the real-time world. And I think this is quite often an oversight from the migration projects that we kind of migrated both of those databases together. So we are saving on the BI development as well by doing that.
Yeah. Jakub, maybe you could talk about that transformation journey and what it was like to go to cloud first, and then the upgrade on the SaaS side as well.
Well, we should still mention that the upgrade's still ongoing. It's going to go live in 2 months into the new system. But the good thing that I think we had is monetizing an AWS partner, and the cloud is not new to your bank. So that was the first good step for us, right? Because we can already, we were not trailblazing new paths and things like that. So that was good. I think I would personally say that, and this is what I like about Monetize, because you guys being really performance driven and looking at the numbers, we always start talking about what it is that you want to get, right? And what's the real value at the end. And then we can sort of really see, all right, this is what needs to happen. We come to conclusions and we say, all right, this makes sense, we're going to do it, right? But technically, in a way, it's just an implementation project. Yeah?
I mean, at the end of the day, with everything we do, we expect return on investment, right? Yeah. So we wouldn't move to the new stack, to new CI 360 without being confident that we can capitalize on that. So we were sure we are using the RTDM to its full potential and the MA to its full potential. We were sure we see something which we can do and where we can make more money with moving to CI 360. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and now kind of on a go-forward basis, Jan, thinking about where, how you can leverage this agility. You talked about the ability to implement new models and try them out in 2 hours. What's the future look like from a Moneda's perspective?
So I will separate the answer into two parts. So one thing that I'm expecting is we'll save time on the hypothesis testing and all of the fancy stuff, and we'll simply be able to do more of that. And by doing more of that, we'll push the conversion sometimes 10 points, sometimes 20 points, with the nice stuff like the streaming, maybe even 2 times or 3 times on some of the campaigns. So that's one part. The other part is that with the whole migration project, we've also agreed with SAS to use the SAS digital part, and we'll implement digital via the native SDK into our mobile banking app, the same awarded app I was speaking about at the beginning. So, and that's probably where we expect the most return on investment, like not cost saving, but real uplift in conversions and real change of what we do, because that's probably the space we've been lacking the most.
That's super exciting. I didn't really get that before. So you're saying you're going to integrate the SAS API right into your mobile app.
Yes.
And how, tell us a little bit more about how that will work and why is that important?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, even though we've been able to push some banners into our mobile banking before, it was pretty tough to do so. It was tough to measure, and with the SDK, the implementation is quite simple. We still have to do some development on the mobile banking part, but it's definitely going to be more. We'll have more oversight of the whole process, because imagine when you're pushing a single banner or maybe few banners. Well, okay, you can handle that. You can handle that piece by piece. But if you want to do something like 500 banners and real-time triggers, and you want to combine it all together, and you still want to have a oversight over what you're doing, then you need some proper management of that and some proper evaluation. And it's probably, you don't want that to take hundreds of hours to measure and evaluate, right? And that's where I believe the SAS Digital and CI360 will help us significantly.
It's what is also interesting to me is because you are focusing on digital channels, and it's obvious because that's kind of the direction that you're taking. But you're still a traditional bank, right?
Right.
So there's branches, there's advisors. You still need to sort of think about the omnichannel way. And I know we're having discussions about, all right, so that's good. So we can trigger actions towards customers. The CX and the mobile app is very good. The customer can quite often go through it, and then, everything's hunky-dory. But with complex processes like mortgages, right, it's not going to happen like that. So we're now having this very interesting discussions of how can you then turn a sort of slightly warmer lead, because the customer is getting through that, and hand the right ones to the branches, because the personnel at the branch is getting smaller and smaller. Yeah, number of branches is also declining, and you want to make the best use of the people's time. So I think that's why we're discussing things like lead grading, lead scoring into that, which is then again done on top of the online data that the customer is actually, as they're going through a process, to make sure that, all right, I can pass you the right lead that you should be really talking to.
I should have maybe mentioned that even though we pushed hard for digital in the last, let's say, 6 years, we are still something we like to call phygital, like physical and digital together. So we are still on the relatively small market. We are still having over 100 branches, right? So the question is, well, if it doesn't sell online, then why don't I push it to the branch? Because there is a bank waiting for that opportunity to finish the deal. So, and that should be the part of the journey as well. Mm-hmm. That's something we are counting with.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about the phygital. I haven't heard the term. It's a great term, phygital bank, and the ability to service customers in their app, as well as when they seamlessly when they come in the branch. That's pretty exciting. And just to go back for a second, so now by incorporating the SaaS API into your mobile app, is it fair to say your decisioning is really happening within SaaS, and then enabling all of these mobile apps based on this real-time data that's coming in? You mentioned Kafka earlier, into the SaaS platform, decision made straight out to the mobile apps. Is that the right way to think about it?
Completely correct.
Yeah, that's super exciting.
I mean, you can do that in real time with the digital. I mean the requirement for the latency for that is pretty tough, right? You got to do the decision in like 200 milliseconds.
Yeah.
For the app to work correctly.
Right.
You can do that.
Yeah.
We've tried it out.
So, Jakub, maybe you could talk a little bit about, you work with many customers across financial services. I know a lot of the work that you have done is with SaaS, and you do some work outside of that as well. What are you seeing in this context across the industry, and what are the big changes that you're thinking about as you expand your business?
Well, I think what's interesting is that when it comes to marketing and the kind of CRM and CI, in terms of banks, they're always talking about the same thing. They want to be relevant, they want to be personalized. What is interesting is they take different approaches. They can still get them to the same goal, but like in Monetas terms, it's really looking at the hard sales, the triggers, what can I do to really give the customer the service that I want. Other banks might be taking more the kind of, I want to be your friend, I want to be your trusted advisor that's looking about your financial health and thinking about, I've noticed something interesting happening, maybe have you considered, reworking your repayment schedule on your loans because you might be running into the problem. So technically, the solutions are very similar, the technology is the same, it's always about fast reactions, real-time data, making fast decisions, but the kind of use case is a bit different. But that's kind of banks, and I'm talking from the Central European perspective, where we still consider banks are still fairly mature in terms of the marketing efforts that they do. I work with a couple of insurance providers as well, and that's very different. Both from the maturity perspective, but it has to do with the data, right? Because I see the very interesting difference in a bank which has transactional data, tons of stuff that you would know about the clients, which insurance companies don't, right? So I see, again, technology probably still the same, but it's much more focused on the digital behavior of the customer, much more focused on, let's say, more traditional channels and advisors really giving them good leads, perhaps not even being in real time that much. That's not that important in that sense, but doing that. Still, they're kind of building the same models and same decisions that they need to have. What's my best offer? How should I optimize the overall mix? Because I need to make sure that my goals are met across the portfolio, not just on one product line or the other. And that's kind of it.
That's really interesting. Think about the different product lines and making sure that you're balanced across your portfolio. Is SaaS CI 360, how important is that in this workflow? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So my perspective on that, we've been using SaaS for optimization for quite some time, and we'll keep doing that because that's the way how we prioritize and how we determine, well, that's the correct channel, that's the correct client, that's the correct product, this combination, and that's how we determine what to whom when.
Right.
For me, that's where the ID comes in, right? Because you want to do the decisions, you want to do the optimizations, that's what you would use, right? The value which comes out from that, interestingly for me, is from the clients I work with, everyone wants to sell more. That's the one thing we have all in common, right? But the traditional mindset is, give me better leads, give me more customers that I can talk to. But you don't have more customers, right? And you probably already give the best leads to your call center, to your branches, etc. But on a given product line, yeah, So what we have seen in terms of the decisioning and the optimization of your mix, this is where you can get really like, well, 20+%, but I've seen cases where it really showed up like 80, 90% more sales, better results, just simply because, you know, the thing is, the best client for my loan might actually not be the one whom I want to call, right? I might want to use that client for a completely different interaction because he would probably buy the loan anyway, right? And that's where the value comes in. And really, I mean, we have observed quite a significant increases in what the clients can do.
I wanna add something to that. So you're completely correct. When we see our portfolio, there's not more, right? We've solicited everyone.
Yeah.
We've sent out our offers to everyone. And now, what you need to do, you need to find more relevance. That's what I said at the beginning. I mean, we got 1.6 million customers. I mean, there's no one who we are eligible to sell to who we are not selling to, right?
Wow.
So we can just do that better. Maybe in correct timing, but I mean, with maybe correct product, right? And by the way, on all of the stuff we are doing, we are always measuring control groups, because as Jakub mentioned, it's not always about pure performance. It's about the performance uplift, because
Right.
most of the most promising leads, they would probably convert even without your email.
Okay, quite interesting. And I love the idea. First, two concepts that you both touched on there. One is this ability to have control groups and really scientifically measure these things using SaaS, which makes it super easy. And then the other is that ability to understand the customer holistically and thinking about the various products you may have offered them that they may already be utilizing, and bringing that whole customer perspective. Jakub, you said something to me earlier. When you start working with a customer, you said the first thing many times they'll talk to you about a campaign. They'll say this campaign and that campaign.
Yeah.
Maybe share that story. I thought it was a good story.
Yeah. I mean, it is coming from the perspective of, you know, to become more relevant. I am convinced that the marketers really need to stop thinking that much about the product and think about the customer. And I've done a number of pieces with our clients when we were trying to really help them go to the next level of marketing. And yes, and you come to the marketers and I ask them, can you tell me what it is that you are doing? And they start explaining to me about campaigns and how do they select clients, right? And then I give them the question, all right, but you know, you want to apparently become customer centric, right? So what it is that you want to talk to your customers about? What are the messages? What are the, you know, contents that you want to deliver? And quite often there's a moment of awkward silence, right? And all right, so can you at least tell me what you're talking to your customers about now? And really, I mean, this conversation then starts moving. And why is it important to me? It's if you want to be relevant, you know, in banking, you still get, you know, a limited number of products, right? And they're fairly commoditized as well. But the point is, the needs are different, the motives are different. You know, I would be selling a loan to someone who might want to take their family for a fancy holiday to some exotic country, rather than to someone who just wants to renovate their you know, summer house in the mountains, right? So it comes to the point that with the technology, it gives you the flexibility, like we discussed already. Now, the point is, what should the marketer do with the time, right? Because you don't have to worry about client selections that much. But you should worry about the offers and the content and working out what are the different things that I want to say. Do I want to say different things across the purchase journeys for the customer, right? I mean, if I mentioned a mortgage. So I always sort of try to reinforce the thought that you might want to be talking to your customer in the beginning, like, do you know I have a great mortgage? Yeah, great. But if they already are in the consideration process, you might want to say, do you know my mortgage is the best value on the market? If they already are past that, but you might want to say, do you know that you can actually apply for it fully online? It just takes 5 minutes of your time. That's and not a hard sell campaign per se, but it pushes the customers to go forward. And I think that's where the sort of value comes in terms of thinking about the messages and the content that you want to relay to your customers.
And by the way, that's why I like the real-time trigger much more than the hyper-personalization, because it pushes you to that thinking like naturally. Because if you imagine, we are ourselves pretty product-driven bank as well, but if you want to change that mindset, that's not a one-day job. So if you transform that thinking into, okay, it's not hyper-personalization, it's not personalization, necessarily personalization of the content itself, it's not about the creative necessarily. You can easily come up with a personalization based on the online trigger, and that's like a natural way of personalizing without even knowing you are doing so.
Right. That's a great point. And I mean, the idea of really understanding your customer and helping the customer at the time that they most likely need that help. You know, and it was interesting, I thought this morning's presentation, Macy's was one of the presenters, and they were talking about customer obsession, and Amazon is all about customer obsession. I think we're all very much focused on understanding our customer, and when you can put the customer together from a 360-degree perspective, understanding all of the capabilities that they may already be using that you could help them with, and now understanding where they are and what their situation is right now, and being able to then go offer them something. You get a lot closer to really understanding the customer and being able to help them. So it's really exciting. I know we've got about 8 minutes left, and I know we want to take some questions. But I first just want to thank both of you, because I feel like I've learned a lot in this whole experience, and it's super exciting just to think about the technology that you've both built. Let's look at questions from the audience. I think we have a microphone. Please raise your hand if you have questions. I'm going to ask you a question, which is, how many of you are in the retail banking space? A lot of you. Okay, and how many of you are concerned about marketing campaigns and reaching your customer, and that's one of the focus of how you're using technology? Also, a number of you, okay. So, curious for anybody, any questions you have, I would throw out a question to all of you, which is, in the absence of any questions, I don't see any yet, which is, what are some of the key pieces of Moneta's journey that come to mind that you might use in your organization? Please.
Actually, it's a question for Jan. Have you built some kind of prioritization of products for customers? The example that Jacob was saying, that you will not necessarily sell the most profitable product to the most propense customer to buy to acquire it, but you will have some strategies to sell a specific product for a specific customer to maximize maybe the relationship in the long term. Have you built some kind of a strategy around that?
Yeah. So the way we are thinking about that. So you still need some core, like, so you gotta like ad hoc proposition for your mortgage, let's say. So you wanna cross sell that to most of the portfolio. You still wanna do that, and you maybe wanna optimize based on the revenue generation the different segments. That's still gonna be there because not everyone's doing the. I mean, if the client is not on your digital channel, if he is not transacting with you, you cannot find any triggers, and still you probably want to sell something to them. So that's like the core of the cross-sell communication. And on top of that, you build the trigger mechanisms, the trigger campaigns, which are sort of pulling out those clients out of this huge pool, which is optimized and segmented, and you're pulling them out, and you're trying to cross-sell them with the more relevant products based on the triggers you've seen they've just done. So there is still the let's call it the batch core, but you build the trigger up on that.
Yes, and what has
Enjoy.
So which layer has proven to be more profitable or more successful? The one that is, batch that you were trying to cross-sell to everyone, or the trigger-based?
Yeah, so strictly profitable, it's going to be the real-time trigger. But here we are. We have to define profitable in a sort of like profitable, really profitable, like percentage-wise. That's going to be the real time. But the most amount of profit is still going to be in the batch part. So just one more sentence. So the conversions can be like triple on the trigger part, but you will cover. When you are starting, you cover probably 20% of the clientele with the trigger part. Maybe if your our aspiration is get to, let's say, 50%, right? But you'll still have the other half. And
what I want to add is this is not a Moneta story. This is with a different bank that we work with, where we build this kind of optimization engine. And the important thing is that the optimization, as you build it into the business, it's also a journey. And what Jan just said is very important, because what we have seen is you want to start even on the batch way, just because of the fact that it's going to bring the value in. And if you want to see then 20-30% increase in revenues, that's great, right? Because you can prove that you have a value and you can have further investments into this. While if you learn to do it in the batch way, which is simpler, right? Because you don't have to worry about competing triggers. If you do that right, then you start just extending the way how you do the arbitration on the, let's say, trigger level, because then you need to go really down to the customer. Start with the portfolio, get it right, then you observe the value, and then you keep on building up.
Ideally, you start the trigger journey by the batch campaign, right? So you send out the batch campaign, suddenly some of those clients will start interacting with your channels, and you can catch the triggers and then continue with the triggers and improve the conversion by that.
And by the way, just one more thing to that. It's since I remember that when we also, there was our suggestion, and we thought that one of the clients that we work with, like the optimization is the answer to what they need to do to really grow, yeah? And it was kind of difficult, a little bit scary, right? Because, I said, yeah, we can optimize what you do, right? What do you want to do? Do you want to sell more? Do you want to get revenues? Do you want to get profit? Do you want to get happier customers in terms of NPS or whatever? You can optimize on that, right? The technical element of it, or the approach, that's well known, right? There's not a rocket science to optimize things. But when we were setting it up, the worry was, okay, but if I go for revenue, I'm just going to go for loans, right? What's going to happen to my other products, which are less profitable? Now, the point is that I said, all right, well, I remember talking, when we were talking to the VPs for retail in that bank, I said, look, it's going to be simple, right? Just imagine it. You give me what's your target, and then we're going to set up all the constraints. Meaning, what's the minimum of sales you want to get on your investments, on your savings? How many contacts can you pass to the call center? How many emails can you send? What's the mix? You build it all into that, and it gives you the result. Hopefully there is a result. It doesn't have to be always. But that's what we did. We explained to the head of retail that, and that's the tool that you're going to have. You don't have to worry about anything else, but you'll play with that, you'll set it up and see what can happen. And then it will happen when you decide to. And that was great. That was the way to do it. And when we tested that, they were still worried that we will sort of prefer the high revenue products against the others. But when I mentioned like this sort of 60-70%, this was the case of the increase. But the interesting part was that we actually managed to ensure the increase across every single of the product lines due to the constraints. So if you get it right, if you get all the inputs in, work it out well, you can still do it. And then you show the results, it works, everyone loves it.
I know that we're unfortunately out of time, but a terrific session. Thank you both so much for presenting today. Thanks for the excellent questions, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much.